Hey guys, I decided to do one or two more examples for you in another video. So we're going to go ahead and do example 8 and to get us started here. So we're going to start, if we're going to make this graph, we're going to start by finding the 5 important things that go with this graph. So the first one would be your amplitude, which in this case will be 1. Your period, which will be 2 pi over 1/3, which turns into 2 pi times 3, which turns into 6 pi. We also want to know the maximum, which is 1, the minimum, which is -1, and color switch. We also want to know the midline. Midline would be 0, and then the 5th thing we want to know is what's 1/4 of the period. Well, 1/4 of 6 pi would turn out to be 3 pi over 2. All right, so that's what we're counting by. So using that information, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw in my x and my y axis. And so here's my y axis, here's my x axis. Since I have maxes and mins of -1 and 1, I can go ahead and I can label, all I need is a 1 and a -1, and I went 4 here, so I'll go 4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. There's your -1. So those are going to be my max and my min. As far as my important points, my first point is going to be 3 pi over 2, so I'm going to put that there. And I'm skipping a line, so I'm going to do the same, do the same, do the same, and just keep making my tick marks. So my first tick mark is going to be at 3 pi over 2. I'm counting by 3/2. So 3 pi over 2, and if I add another one, that's going to put me at 6 pi over 2, which is reduced 2 pi. 6 pi over 2 plus, again, I started at 3 pi over 2. I added another 3 pi over 2. That took me to 6 pi over 2. 6 pi over 2, add another 3 pi over 2, you're going to be at 9 pi over 2. Add another 3 pi over 2, you're going to be at 12 pi over 2, which is the end of your period, 6 pi. So this is a cosine curve. Cosine curve with A being positive, which it is, starts at a maximum. So my first dot is going to be right here at my maximum. Then I go to the midline, then I go to the minimum, back to the midline, and back to the maximum. And I use those dots to go ahead and outline my cosine function. Notice I show the turn and show the arrows that they keep going. Now, just for argument's sake and to make sure you get the pattern, what would be the next entry, the next tick mark? How would it be labeled? If you said 15 pi over 2, you are correct. And the dot would be happening here at the midline. You could also continue backwards. So if this was positive 3 over 2, if from 0 I'd back up, this would be -3 pi over 2. that's basically, and that's a cosine curve, and again, applying all those items. So you should probably take a second and try to graph. Let's have you graph number 10. So take a moment, pause the video, and try number 10. Okay, you're probably back now. Let's go ahead and look at the solution. So I'd want to go ahead and set up my axes, and my axes here would be here and here, and I'm going to go ahead and just go to the magic of the solution, so hold that thought. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, here's what your graph should basically look like. What I want you to notice is that this cosine graph, instead of starting at a maximum, it started at the minimum because this was a -2, so it flips and starts at the minimum, but we went minimum, midline, maximum, midline. This would indicate the end of the period. I just went ahead and let the graph keep going. We're counting by pi on our ticky marks because a fourth of the period turns into pi. Also, some people asked, why are you skipping a line, Miss Angotti, when you make your tick marks? The only reason is just to spread it out. If you had to draw 3 complete periods in this space, you probably wouldn't be able to skip the ticky marks, and you'd have to bunch them all together. It's up to you. Those marks are the marks that are important to you. If you want to put them right next to each other, you're welcome to do it. If you wanted to spread them out a little bit more, you're welcome to do that also. You just have to adjust for the space you're operating in. Okay, hopefully that should get you up to speed, and again, leave you able to do your homework. When we come back next week, we will look at starting from the graph and writing the equation that goes with that graph. All right, thanks so much, and I'll see you in class next week.